We are the nation of Tuvalu. As stakeholders of climate change, we have a concern about the recent developments of this subject, and are interested in the effects of climate change and how the inconsistent climate will soon destroy our nation. With Tuvalu being the world's fourth smallest independent nation, on the verge of rising sea levels, by the year 2100 our country could be inhabitable, thus classifying Tuvalu as one of the most endangered countries on this planet. Located in the southwest Pacific Ocean, Tuvalu's climate is described as hot and tropical with very little seasonal variation, but with heavy rainfall and rather frequent cyclones and hurricanes.
Tuvalu is a constitutional monarchy with a parliamentary democracy, similar to Australia's political structure. Our head of government is the Prime Minister, Mr. Anele Sosen Sopoaga, and he and the Deputy Prime Minister are elected by members of Parliament. There are 15 members of Parliament who are held accountable by elections through popular vote every 4 years. The country is politically stable.
We represent one of the Earth's least developed countries, defined by low income, a weak human resource system, and economic vulnerability. Tuvalu is a group of 9 small islands located south of the equator and midway between Hawaii and Australia, with an estimated population of 12,000. Our nation has very strong views on the influence of climate change. Therefore, we have decided to approach this operation with the assistance of our least developed countries to try and make a difference for our population and the populations of other vulnerable nations. In 2013, the Global Climate Change Alliance was able to support various governments of the least developed countries, including Tuvalu, to tackle the detrimental effects of climate change to our country. Portions of financial and economical management have also been supported by the Global Climate Change Alliance and are still being sustained. Last year, in 2015, the leaders of the Pacific Islands Forum were serious about the factors in reducing greenhouse gas emissions and balancing oceanic acidification. The importance of ensuring sustainable management for fisheries and the strengthening of maritime surveillance was mentioned to be finalised by the Pacific Islands Forum at the past assembly, which was held in Papua New Guinea.
Tuvalu is precariously placed in a highly vulnerable position, being confronted with the direct consequences of global warming and climate change. The continually rising sea levels is an urgent issue for Tuvaluans, with the highest point in the country being a mere 4.6 metres above sea level on the island of Nicoleto. Tuvalu faces being the first nation to become completely submerged beneath the sea level, with the disappearance of a small islet in 2007, just one of the 4 islands to have disappeared. Global warming caused by human activity is one of the root causes of the rise of sea levels threatening Tuvalu, as it contributes to the melting of land glaciers and ice caps in Antarctica. By the end of the 21st century, scientists have estimated for an increased sea level rise of a minimum of 0.79 metres, placing Tuvalu in a detrimental state of emergency. Due to the effects of climate change and global warming, the 9 islands of Tuvalu has developed fragile and unstable weather and land for citizens to inhabit. Although not highly acknowledged within society, the threat Tuvalu is currently facing has not abruptly become an issue. The country is filled with thriving flora and fauna that are struggling to adapt to the ever-changing environment that is essentially destroying the island from the inside out. An increase in flooding during the wet season, which now lasts up to 5 months, has soaked through the porous limestone soil and increased salinity levels, drowning the existing plants and decreasing the chances for vegetation on the land. With water running through the land of Tuvalu at an additional rate, it is spreading the elements from landfill in the soil and destroying surrounding coral reef through the increase of pollution. The flooding has additionally weakened the strength of the soil, resulting in the sinking of unstable structures. Tuvalu is at a heightened risk of natural disasters, including cyclones, tsunamis, extreme rainfall, and storm surges. The average temperature in Tuvalu is predicted to rise 3.3 degrees Celsius by 2090, with the increase of global warming. The citizens that occupy the islands of Tuvalu are increasingly becoming victims of global warming and climate change. The civilians are at a serious risk of being forced to become climate refugees and seek safety within another country to inhabit. If this occurs, the displacement of Tuvaluans will result in the loss of culture and language embedded within our country, as citizens seek refuge in new countries. These are just some of the problems Tuvalu will face in the near future if global warming and other environmental issues are not addressed rapidly.
As Tuvaluans, we deserve the right to live in our homeland, and therefore we feel that there needs to be greater effort in combating what could ultimately destroy our livelihoods. This is why our Prime Minister signed and ratified the historic Paris Agreement on April the 22nd. There have been multiple solutions floated by a variety of different parties regarding climate change. One action we called for in the Pacific Islands Forum last September is for ambitious, clearly defined and transparent commitments by all parties to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Doing so is absolutely vital to stabilise greenhouse gas concentrations in the atmosphere. This will not just protect our country, but nations across the world where citizens will be affected by intensifying rates of climate change. We also agree that renewable energy must be embraced on a scale never seen before, particularly in countries that contribute more to the acceleration of climate change than any other. We declared in the forum that an increase of 1.5 degrees in the global average temperature will push many small nations beyond their capacity to adapt, a harrowing statistic by any means. Financial support also has to be mobilised to developing countries, including Tuvalu, to assist in adapting to climate change and managing disasters and various issues caused by climate alteration. And this money should come from major corporations emitting large amounts of greenhouse gases, as well as the countries they reside in. And their actions directly contribute to the thousands of people being displaced and affected in places such as Tuvalu, and they should be held accountable for that. A much more radical solution, proposed by Bill McKibben, is that society has to break its most debilitating habit, growth. The drive for economic growth has become embedded in society, and this model has become harmful for the planet we live on. This is a very unfavourable idea, as halting growth in economies that are engineered to expand, and instead shifting to more localised and durable economies, would potentially destroy many lives. But the scholar argues that the dangers of climate change are far worse, and the actions being proposed and followed currently may not be enough to save us. This idea may not be entirely realistic or practically applicable, but it is useful to consider when proposing other solutions, and could be considered as a last resort.
Whilst we as a nation are able to combat climate change using the previously mentioned methods, we are also constrained in what we can accomplish due to several factors. Being recognised as an LDC by the United Nations does not simply mean we're perceived as a lesser developed culture. It also articulates our influence and power over not only ourselves, but global issues that directly affect us and our nation. Tuvalu is also considerably constrained in efforts to fight climate change because of geographical factors surrounding it. Being the fourth smallest country in the world, stretching only 26 square kilometres, comes with its own constraints. Whilst we are not a large nor powerful nation, and whilst we also fall under the security and guidance of larger nations, we too have our own political standpoint. Whilst we have a stable domestic political system, our international position is not as safe. Due to having little to no power on an international scale in regards to political, geographical and military forces, we are unable to influence other nations through leading by example. Instead, as Zena previously mentioned, we stand representatives of other small nations and LDCs facing similar threats, and suggest sanctions to other nations of whom can actually do something with the power they have in the fight against rapid climate change. Economic hardships, which come with being such a small nation, forced us into a position to accept the offering hands of other nations, of which helped to form the Tuvalu Trust Fund in 1987. Primarily funded by nations such as the United Kingdom, Australia, USA, New Zealand and the European Union, our nation relies on the continuous financial support to get through the many hardships and climate crises our nation faces. Environmental crises, like those mentioned by Chloe, call for immediate action. The effect of these impacts across a widely scattered archipelago, like Tuvalu, means that normal conditions will change by exceeding the current normal extreme event occurrences. These maritime influence conditions will contribute to an increased development of extreme events both during and outside current climate seasons, affecting already vulnerable areas and sections of society who reside on these islands. In 2010, a according to Tuvalu's infrastructure government, there were 1,648 visitors to the island, 65% of whom were strictly there for business. Whilst the idea of ecotourism is a motive that Tuvalu uses to attract tourists, the lack of interest in the nature's culture and environment had a crippling effect on the economic state. In 2013, Tuvalu's status elevation from an LDC to a developing country was pushed back until last year. However, to the current day, it still has not been recognised by the United Nations as anything other than an LDC.
As Max said, Tuvalu is not yet recognised as a developing country and thus holds little tangible sway in global affairs. This forces us to rely heavily on the support of other stakeholders and hope that they can assist in contributing to a solution to the global climate change crisis. We as a nation take climate change very seriously, as it is of grave concern to our people, our home and our culture. There are countless other islands in the Pacific who share our concern and wish to see something done about the situation. The 46th Pacific Island Forum Leaders Summit in 2015 stated that the Pacific Island Forum was deeply concerned with the impacts of and the growing threat posed by climate change. Our island is especially exposed to the effects of climate change because, as Chloe mentioned, our elevation above sea level is the lowest in the world at only 4.6 metres, leaving us horrendously unprotected to rising tides, a phenomenon directly linked to climate change. Our closest allies are those who have realised what a serious threat climate change truly poses. These include other LDCs such as Haiti, who faces the loss of their lands and their culture if nothing is done, along with environmentalist groups who have dedicated themselves to the cause. These stakeholders are prepared to do what is necessary to combat climate change, as we feel as though this sentiment needs to be spread to the rest of the world. First world countries such as Australia and the US use climate change as a political buzzword, trying to gain voters by supporting or opposing legislation on the issue. We feel as though these countries are not taking the threat seriously enough and do not understand the immediate danger that we all face. Since 1947, the Solomon Islands have been experiencing a gradual shoreline change. Indeed, at least 11 islands have disappeared completely. At least 2 villages have been destroyed by rising tides in the area, and warnings have been told that Taro, the capital of the Kohoisu province, is on the path to becoming the first capital in the world to be forced to relocate its residences due to this threat. If this information alone wasn't terrifying enough, Tuvalu regularly faces flooding, typhoons, and cyclones. When combined with our country's low elevation, lethal damage can easily affect our population. We rely on aid from other countries, but cannot do so forever. A permanent solution to climate change needs to be found, and Tuvalu cannot do it alone. We urge stakeholders around the globe to unite with us in our stand against climate change, to help save the lives of our people and our culture, and that of nations who are similarly threatened. The time to act is now, before it's too late.